This year I've been trying to put a lot of time into reshaping my image from guy who really likes tokusatsu but really hates that one season of Power Rangers into guy who happens to like a lot of things that are mostly united under the banner of having toys made of them, because toys are the main thing I'm interested in and have stayed interested in my entire life. I never had that period that a lot of adult collectors talk about where I started going like, oh, I'm too old for toys. I'm interested in girls and video games and cars now. Yeah, cars are my life all of a sudden. No, I stayed interested in toys for pretty much my entire life. There was certainly a period where I couldn't buy as many of them because my parents weren't giving me allowance anymore and I didn't have a job yet, but I always kept abreast of what was going on in the industry because I find it absolutely fascinating. Although, with that said, I haven't really talked about a lot of old toys on the channel. Sure, I've mentioned a lot of modern toys and done straight-up reviews of them in this very spot, in fact. I haven't really highlighted one of the original toy lines that stoked those early fires in me, that set my taste in what made for a good toy for years to come. And seeing as we're getting close to the end of the year, I want to take a little bit of your time today to do that by asking a very simple question, which just so happens to be, do you remember Rescue Heroes? Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm the Vacuuminator, another ages 20 and up white guy who happens to like talking about bits of plastic from when he was just a little guy that make his brain do a happy. And if that sounds like your kind of thing, maybe consider doing the YouTube things. Like, comment, subscribe, all that. I'll tell you a little more later. But right now, I kind of want to just get into it because this is a toy line that happens to mean a lot to me, but is weirdly underrepresented in the internet nerd sphere. So let's get to it. If you've never heard of them before, Mattel's Fisher-Price's Rescue Heroes are a vaguely 6-inch-ish line of action figures that were introduced in 1997, which means they're literally as old as I am. The line was mainly themed around making toys of all manner of rescue personnel and equipment, or as the commercial liked to describe it,
tough guys who are good guys.
Which is just kind of awkward and weird as a tagline, I have to say. Like, I get what they were going for, but it's just a little clumsy and comes off weirdly conspiratorial, especially with the commercial later going on to say,
finally, your kid will be rooting for the good guys.
Which just sounds weird coming from a company that's owned by Mattel. Like, do you guys know something about He-Man and She-Ra you're not sharing with the rest of us? But that branding was really only there for the first couple waves. After that, it ballooned out into this expansive narrative of all manner of people you would find responding to an emergency situation, connected as part of a global response team that helped out wherever and whenever there was an emergency of any kind. There was just tons of stuff going on, man. All manner of sub-teams, animal companions, and vehicles for them, all united in these big, expansive, expensive base play sets that told the narrative of whenever there's trouble,
land, sea, sky,
the Rescue Heroes will be there to help out. And oh my god, I just realized, this is just G.I. Joe without the guns and goofy supervillains. I mean, don't get me wrong, they weren't using any of the same characters, and it was an entirely different theme, but it's basically the same format, and it's a wonder nobody's ever picked up on that before. But it also helps explain why I got so many of these as a kid. They were mainly Christmas and birthday gifts from relatives, and I imagine to a lot of them it was just kind of familiar, because a lot of my older relatives grew up with the original G.I. Joe, whether it be the movable fighting man or the adventure team. However, that's all I could really dig up or figure out on my own about Rescue Heroes, because as I hinted at earlier, there's not a lot of comprehensive archiving of this line online. When I did a YouTube search, I found the old cartoon and commercials, but nobody's reviewed these before except for a few randos here and there that didn't even cover more than a couple of figures. And as far as checklists go, yeah, there's a couple, but they're all based off of old internet models that hardly work anymore, and they're woefully incomplete, which I was able to figure out for the sheer fact of I have stuff that's not on them, and I can find stuff that's not on them through a simple eBay search for Rescue Heroes. Which is a real shame, because as I said earlier, I like toys in general. Even if a brand doesn't appeal to me personally, I still want to know about it. I still want to understand why it was around and popular back in the day, even if I don't want it in my own collection, because it's part of the greater pop culture experience the entire world has been going through since the start of the 20th century. And I feel it's important we document that for future generations, which is a big part of why I'm doing the video that I'm doing today the way I'm doing it. I'm going to go through all 10 toys I have because there's no reviews for any of them out there, and I want anyone else who has this stuff or remembers it to get their own interest in it kickstarted. And if you're one of those people, please make your own videos. Make your own online checklist for other fans to go off of. I know this kind of fandom grunt work can be tedious and uninteresting sometimes, but it's an important thing to do if we want this to stick around as something for older generations. Transformers fans know it, He-Man and G.I. Joe fans know it, Ninja Turtle fans know it, so why shouldn't Rescue Heroes take up the call as well? And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say, oh, kids today don't know about Rescue Heroes, they don't know about what's good. This isn't an old man yelling at clouds here. I'm simply asking other people of my generation to do their part in preserving the memory of our childhoods. So here's me doing my part. And I guess the best place to start is with the original Rescue Hero and my original Rescue Hero. This is Billy Blazes and Sam Sparks, respectively, who are two pretty nice firefighter guys that happened to be a big part of my childhood because, and I'm not joking at all here, while I got Sam Sparks at a very early point in my development and loved him and played with him a ton, I actually thought he was Billy Blazes my entire life until just a few months ago when myself and some of the Modular guys were doing an eBay deep dive one night, and I happened to run across this guy while trying to find the Billy Blazes variant I thought I had as a kid. It's kind of hilarious, actually, because while they look very similar at first glance, they're actually entirely different sculpts. Like, I can't find a single shared part between the two of them except for maybe the backpack pegs, and they both have their own charm to them. Like, check it out. Billy is totally rocking that Duke and Optimus Prime dad energy with his big old broom stash and nice, friendly, squished up proportions. But he's also a little plainer than a lot of the other ones I have. Don't get me wrong, there's stuff going on here. He's certainly a realistic representation of what a firefighter looks like, at least at this budget level and time frame. But he's just a little undercooked, you know? There's certain bits that I'm like, there should probably be a little more to these armbands. There should probably be a little more to his boots and buckles. But as is, he's still fairly nice. He's also got some really good articulation for the time. Like, don't get me wrong, there are certainly lines that were doing better back then. But for a kid's toy of the late 90s, I'm really shocked that he not only has your standard 5 POA swivel at the neck, shoulders, and hips, but he also has a bend at the elbow, a wrist joint, and a friggin' waist swivel. This is stuff that wasn't standard on Transformers until decades after this, and yet here it is on a toy that's as old as I am. That's crazy. And while Sammy Spavara here is missing the waist joint that floors me so much, he does have a lot more sculpting than Billy. Like, there's all these little wrinkles and folds in his uniform that make it feel much more realistic. He's got all these little buckles and pouches picked out in a very nice silver paint, knee pads even, and it just all comes together for something that feels way nicer than I would expect from a 90s, early 2000s toy. Like, don't get me wrong, it's definitely nostalgia talking, because they pale in comparison to some stuff I've looked at from the last year alone, but I can't help but love these guys. They just really feel like I'm getting bang for my buck here, especially with familiar fun details like their big-ass communicator headsets, secret Easter egg Fisher-Price logos, and just the overall friendliness of them. But of course, that wasn't actually the appeal of Rescue Heroes figures. It was mainly their big gimmicky backpacks, which slide on thanks to these sculpted-in pegs on the back, which, as an adult, I know it's meant to convey that there's like some sort of power pack they're hiding under their clothes, but the weird gears and pistons sculpted on here just always made me low-key wonder if they were supposed to be cyborgs as a kid. Oh well, good job it gets hidden away as soon as you slide on the backpack and swing over its big, ridiculous arm that he can hold on to once you get it lined up just right. And, yeah, I really like Billy's big-ass chopping apparatus here. I don't really know what it's supposed to be other than fun, but I do dig that they stuck to a thematic firefighter thing here of having a big old axe that can chop through burning doors so he can get to people. However, I gotta admit, it's not quite as good as Fireman Sam's spring-loaded water hose here, which I adored as a kid. From its bright, shiny red chrome to the spring-loadedness of it, I spent hours playing with just this part of the toy. Even broke off the trigger at one point and then just started manually squeezing it down and letting it go as a sort of preschool stress toy, if you can believe it. It's honestly kind of funny looking back, knowing I used to think these two were the same guy, because while they do look similar and one of them wasn't in the show and one of them was,
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong.
there's a clear narrative between the two of them. Like, Sam puts the fire out while Billy goes in and rescues civilians. But they can't do it all on their own. They probably need some air support. So why don't I introduce you to the third man of the Rescue Heroes firefighter team. Ladies and gentlemen, this, and I cannot believe I get to say this name on camera, is Hal E. Coptor. Yeah, if you haven't caught on yet, Rescue Heroes all have extremely specific and punny names that kind of feel like they're trying to be in the same spirit as the word association game that G.I. Joe, Transformers, and He-Man all played, but like, it's his actual name. It's not a code name, it's not a nickname, it's not a moniker. This dude is literally named Helicopter. And I mean, that's not the worst, goofiest thing I've ever seen in the toy industry, but as pointed out to me by a friend only a couple years ago, it is weirdly evocative of another naming scheme that used to be heavily prevalent in a type of media that definitely is not kid-friendly. Let's give old Hal, I can't believe it's not Jordan here, a break, because he was one of my childhood favorites. Like, you gotta respect the amount of sculpting on this guy, from the laced up boots to the silver buckles and zippers that are nicely picked out, right down to the frickin' shoulder insignias that really give this guy a great aviator feel that's topped off nicely by the big old head sock, which looks a bit weird compared to the other figures we've already seen, but it's entirely in service of this removable helmet gift he has, which definitely implanted an early love of stuff like this that set me up to be interested in stuff like Clone Troopers as I got older. But just like the other guys, that's not even the best part of Hal, because his backpack is an entire ass vehicle. Yes, friends, say hello to the closest I ever got to the quick response helicopter as a kid, which, honestly, I kind of love this better than I think I would have that other entirely separate toy, because just look at it, man. The bright red chrome all over gives it this glorious feel. It has these cool swiveling fire extinguishers up front. There's button-activated rotor blades that are actually much more fun than you'd expect them to be. Plus, there's handlebars on the back for him to airlift any other rescue hero figure right out of danger with. I just love that they actually sculpted in the instrument panel here. Like, they totally didn't need to do that. It still would have worked perfectly fine as a toy without it, but they did, and I see it. I appreciate it. He just comes off like a total package here that totally puts me in the mind of stuff like the G.I. Joe Trouble Bubble or the Star Wars Jedi Interceptors. You think I got too many of those things? Though what might need to be forgotten after this review at least is these two copper clods, cause don't get me wrong, I'm a very socially minded creator, or at least I try to be. I don't like the taste of boots at all. I definitely acknowledge there's a lot of problems with the police. We need heavy reform in this country, if not a total abolishment and start from scratch, but dang it, this is a toy I had when I was a kid, and it reminds me of that time and makes me happy, and I want to share some of that joy with you guys. And if you can't get down with that, I totally understand, but like, just skip to the next part of the video and let me have my fun. What I'm trying to say is discussion of and adoration for these two toys does in no way reflect my real-world opinions towards law enforcement, and please do not take it out of context and use it as such. And that's out of the way. These two are Jake Justice. Yes, both of them. There's some unique sculpting on the go for each of them. I actually think both of the bodies are entirely different from each other, but the heads are the same. But they're both unique enough that I can justify having them both. However, my brain won't let me justify that they're the same character. So for the entire rest of the review, this isn't Jake Justice. This is Jeff Justice. This has to be a different guy, because this is the one I had when I was a kid, and this is one I got from my local vintage toy store a few months back. So just remember that, everybody, for the rest of the review.
My name is Jeff.
Anyway, there's definitely a level of charm to the both of them. Like, my childhood boy here is definitely sporting that highway patrolman look with the silver pants and black shirt and just general I'm better than you vibe. But you've also got the city patrolman vibes going on with this other guy. That might be the first time I burped on camera during a take. Jesus. But you've also got the sort of city beat cop vibe of this other one that I also dig a fair bit. Don't get me wrong, the whistle and badge definitely unite these two as the same character, but I like how this guy is set apart, having a walkie, cuffs, and item that makes me really uncomfortable whenever I see a cop in real life. But the reason I actually have two of the same guy is the fact that they both have very different backpack-style gimmick additions. And in the case of my childhood guy, it's that it's not a backpack at all, it's an entire-ass bike. Yeah, this is actually my main reason for still being able to enjoy this guy, because people who weren't poor growing up might not be able to understand this, but for me, this motorcycle toy was every motorcycle toy. This wasn't just my Jake Justice patrol cycle, this was my Bat cycle, it was my ridiculously oversized Ram, it was every Transformer with a bike mode that I didn't own who just happened to be stuck in bike mode today. And even getting past that ultra-specific reasoning, this is still a really fun bike toy on its own. Like, it's got these big, nice, chunky wheels that just have this rolling motion that triggers sense memories in me. Plus, the spring-loaded battering ram on the front is a really nice touch, even though it doesn't go out really that far from the bike itself, so as a kid I tended to just point it downwards and use it more like Speed Racer's jump jacks. Do you know what I mean, man? There's just something about this that fueled my imagination for years, and getting it back in my life last year after being without it for almost a full decade definitely hit me in a place. But that's not to say Jeffrey Copper doesn't also have some stuff going on, because while I do love that bike, they definitely leaned really hard into the police theming with this version, because just check out this gloriously chromed backpack here. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is very faded, and it's for that reason that I cringe really hard whenever modern toys have chrome on them, but seeing it in toys from my childhood and back is still really fun, and the fact that it's here for a ridiculous spring-loaded missile launcher that has like a sculpted-in chain and badge, and the actual missile is a pair of handcuffs that close around another figure when you fire them and can be pulled back on a cord that ends in a frickin' sculpted key. That's just brilliant toy design right there. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely low-key propaganda for an institution I have absolutely no love for as an adult, but there's just such good commitment to the bit here, and theming, and an undeniable cool guy factor that makes me realize why I liked police back when I was a kid, and I just like seeing cool guys doing cool stuff back before I knew terms like no-knock warrants and police brutality. It's just pure childhood fun, and that's what I'm about. But that's enough awkward cancellation dodging for one video. Let's move on to something a little more fun and a lot more stupid, because friends, this is Cliffhanger, or at least some later Neon Nightmare repaint of him that I absolutely adore. Like, yeah, I generally tend to prefer more realistic color schemes for my toys, and I will hunt down the original version of this guy in those colors at some point. But there's just something about this, man, that just screams fun time. Like, you just cannot deny the Nickelodeon green straps, grimace purple gloves, and smug, fun-loving attitude that face sculpt gives off that really makes you realize why they chose to make this dude an Australian in the cartoon.
It's like finding a needle in a haystack.
However, that's only half the story, because the whole reason they call him Cliffhanger is the fact that he has this hang glider backpack that for some reason they chose to do up in frickin' neon laser translucent green and orange? What? I just love this thing, man. It feels like a simpler in function but crazier in colors version of what Hal had going on. I mean, you got these spring-loaded wings that really give me the same level of satisfaction as like uncoiling a spring-loaded umbrella on a rainy day. Also, he can swoop around and grab people hanging off cliffs with this button-activated capture claw. You gotta love it. It's pure and simple toy design goofiness at its finest, and it makes him a great addition to the Rescue Heroes Air Team, along with the one animal companion I happen to own right now. Folks and Focalinas, this is Swoops the Eagle, who is definitely a striking piece with the intricately sculpted feathers and wings, the golden grippy claws for grabbing onto dudes with a backpack piece that I've never had, and he just has this nice little companion vibe to him. You know, he's not got much going on, but he's got a look that really feels like he's the Digivolution of Freedom from G.I. Joe. But yeah, I didn't have either of these guys when I was a kid. In fact, everything we're going to be looking at from this point on is stuff I didn't have when I was a kid, but I can definitely picture myself having a ton of fun swooshing and swooping the two of them around my living room. However, while button-activated spring and friction gimmicks are tons of fun, as the line went on, they started to skew more and more towards electronics, with the Mission Select subline that I sadly don't have anything from, and they themed the entire CGI movie around, which, yeah, I wasn't about to risk the cringe levels of rewatching that for this video. but I was willing to check out the theme song they made for it, and oh man, might be the most dated thing I've heard in a long time.
Realize now that something has changed, and I'm not seeing things quite the same. Can it be that there's more to this game?
Seriously, people call the songs they made for the Transformers the movie kiddish butt rock, but that really takes the cake. However, something I do have is an item from the Voice Tech line, which was kicking around about the same time, and happened to have the only female character I currently have in my collection. This is Wendy Waters, who was basically the Scarlet to Billy Blaze's Duke. She was the main female character, she was spunky, she was able to keep up with the boys, and she had red hair. However, this later take on the character is wildly different from what I think anyone would know, because her look in the cartoon was based on her original figure, which I could have gotten for this video, but I just find this girl a little more interesting, because she doesn't even look like she's from the same line. I mean, some of the same details are here, but her twiggy limbs are all decked out in detailing and pouches that put me in mind of like a Rob Liefeld character. Seriously, if this weren't a kid's toy, I'd be kinda shocked they didn't detail her tits and ass better. And that's not me trying to be crude, that's just me trying to be mindful of how women were depicted in male-targeted media at the time. But yeah, as the name implies, Voice Tech was all about what the figures could do when these big electronic backpacks got involved by talking to the prongs on the pegs in the back. It would tell them what character was plugged in, what mission they were going on, and lines from the voice actors would play. And I do mean would, because this one doesn't work anymore. I've tried everything from cleaning it up to putting fresh batteries in, basically everything I can think of short of resoldering the circuit board, which I am not skilled enough to do, and she just won't talk to me. But hey, at least she's still got all of her gear, like this cool mission chip that plugs into the backpack in a way that sort of reminds me of Kamen Rider gimmick toys, and a friggin' axe! She's the only rescue hero I have that has another handheld tool that doesn't attach to the backpack, and it's a friggin' fireman's axe. Like, yeah, she's not going to be going full psycho murderer on anybody, but it's just kind of hilarious that the obviously way less muscular female character has a handheld axe, and big, strong, tough Billy Blazes needs a full-on activating apparatus attached to his backpack to run his axe. Like, come on, man, pick up the slack. But Voice Tech also happens to be the only subline I have an entirely separate vehicle handy to talk about. So, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, put your hands together, if you will, for the utter insanity that is the Voice Tech fire truck. I love this thing. Even though the electronics are just as borked as Wendy's, it's still a really nice, good, big fire truck toy that gets any kid's imagination going. And I do mean that, by the way. Whenever my nephew comes over to visit, he instantly grabs this thing and starts zooming it around the hallway. It's adorable. And I mean, even without the electronics, it's still got a lot going on. There's room to hold up to 4 figures and 3 of their backpacks. You got removable fireman's ladders here, and a swiveling water turret that seems to have firing missiles, because one of them actually came out during the drive over here, but that's never happened before. I've never been able to find a trigger button for this thing anywhere. This just was sitting entirely separate from it when I opened the trunk after pulling in today. Let's see if I can get it clipped back in. I haven't tried it all yet. Yeah, solid click there, but no idea how to get it back out. None of the buttons do it. There's no button on it, so enjoy living in your home until I see you come out again, friendo. And normally this would be where I would end a video like this on the biggest item possible, but there's actually one more thing that I want to show you that's actually kind of better. At least to me anyway. Max Power Paramedics here is the absolute pinnacle of cheesy early 2000s toy design. Because, like, look at him, man. He's clearly just a regular doctor guy who strapped on some hacker's ass circuit boards so that he could be in keeping with the latest fashion of, we have very powerful battery operated things this week. And I do mean enormity, because just look at how big the Max Power backpack Perry Cox comes with here. It's really ridiculous how huge this apparatus that swings over his shoulder is just for the thing it does. And ladies, gentlemen, and others, I truly hope you are sitting down and not eating anything while watching this, because I guarantee you are not ready for the utter insanity that is Max Power Paramedic's rescue lift. That's right, Max Power. Oh man, the motor is clearly worn down from years of being well played with, but you can't deny that that's just hilarious, that in an emergency situation, this guy is supposed to run up to find somebody trapped in a high place, slowly lift his little rescue lift up there, and then slowly get somebody back down before anything worse can happen. Like, imagine this guy trying to rescue somebody who's stuck on the second floor of a burning building. That's not gonna go too well, bud. But I do love him. He's kind of like if Egon Spangler were created by Jim Lee, and I gotta admit, it's a vibe. And that's all the original Rescue Heroes toys I got. But what became of the line after that? Well, it wrapped up its original 10-year run in 2007, only to come back just a couple years later in the Imaginext scale as Hero World, also incorporating a bunch of licensed superhero characters Mattel happened to have the rights to at the time. But that didn't really last too long or leave nearly as much of an impact, because it didn't have the unfortunate real-world advantage the original line did of happening to start just a few years before a massive tragedy that made folks generally much more sympathetic towards and interested in rescue personnel. That's not conjecture on my part, by the way. Nearly every article I could find about the line the other day cites 9/11 as a major reason for the success of Rescue Heroes, which, yeah, that's pretty yikes, but what are you going to do? It's not like Fisher-Price themselves were responsible for it. They just happened to be in the right place at the right time to benefit from it. And I would be totally remiss if I didn't also mention that Rescue Heroes also came back in 2019 for a Walmart exclusive line with a YouTube exclusive cartoon that only lasted one wave. And it's kind of easy to see why. Like, I don't want to be the kids today don't have good toys anymore, all toys today are crap, only the stuff I grew up with is good kind of guy, but there's just something about the way they really smoothed out Billy Blazes to make him more animation ready here that's a little bit off-putting. Though maybe that's just me being nostalgia guy, because this is actually my nephew's toy. I'm borrowing it for this video, and he loves this thing. Regularly fires off the missile that's in it only to pop it back in and do it again, and that's why I don't have it right now. It's missing. We gotta find it or he's gonna lose it. So yeah, that's kind of all there is to say about Rescue Heroes, at least all I have to say with the limited knowledge I have. So once again, if you've been watching this going, hey, I remember that, or hey, I have some of those, do your own video. Let people know what you like about Rescue Heroes and maybe add some bits of knowledge to the sphere that I don't have. Like, as much as I love all those other big 80s and 90s brands, we don't need another channel talking about Transformers, G.I. Joe, Ninja Turtles, He-Man, or even Power Rangers. All that stuff is really well covered. We need more channels that are going to talk about smaller, more forgotten lines like Rescue Heroes. It may be kind of harder to drum up an audience doing that, but it's worth doing for cultural preservation alone, in my opinion. Which just keys back into my ever-going adage of you never fail until you stop trying, which is why I'm going to keep trying to keep rescue heroes in people's public consciousness, even if it's kind of awkwardly and annoyingly bringing it up a la Scott Pilgrim. So if you enjoyed this and you want to see more of this, again, don't forget to do those YouTube things. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, and engage with the algorithm. And check out all my videos as they come out right to your sub box. Also, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon, where for just $1 a month you can get the videos a little bit early. You can get an exclusive monthly behind-the-scenes Patreon podcast and your name in the end screen. And, hey, maybe check out the shirt store. If you don't feel like buying Rescue Heroes off eBay, you could at least buy some of my merch. But until next time, this is the Vacuuminator and Billy Blazes signing off.